Mate, I didn't need to walk straight into Territory Express. Holy cow. But we will get to that. Good to see you, mate. Heard about you on something other than a fave. Good to see. Yeah, I back about 4 favourites a year, so it's not a bad effort. Oh shit. Bit of a slow news day, so a bit more to talk about. Good old Craig Williams, Reggie up and about on Twitter. Don't really think he picked the right week to do it, but anyway, good to see. What do we got there? Yeah, poor Craig. Poor Craig. Bit weird. Anyway, I'll have a quick look at Caulfield. There wasn't much else there, was there, other than Brudenell's race, nothing exciting, title choice, World's on by. Bob Bastile's not going to the slippers, so probably just look at the All-Star Mile from there. No, it's ridiculous, the whole Craig thing, but yeah, we'll get to that. Oops, best joke of all time. Yeah, Rosehill was a bit funky, the track, but I was more concerned with what it was looking like, or why it was looking the way it was pre-meeting. You know, you've got penetrometer readings and track walkers saying it's a genuine slow when there was no reason for it to be, and it was just never gets addressed, and that's probably what made me more grumpy than trying to set the meeting up or whatever. You just don't know what you've got to work with, really. So it's just the uncertainty at the start of the day that makes it difficult. The track wasn't disgraceful, but there was no real reason for it, and I guess that's the biggest problem, that we just don't get really told the full truth, I don't feel. Apologies for up territory. Still wound up. Mate, I've had, yeah, I'm right with you. I'll show you one from today that was a bit sick as well, which was sort of a double down. Yeah, I don't mind seeing Baylor say it. I just think there's probably a lot better opportunities. Maybe he was just fed up, you know what I mean? Don't really know what was behind it, but certainly not knocking him for singing out. Doesn't play slow, I guess. That's the problem. You get this position, like the first race was a diabolical midway that probably shouldn't be on the card. They go exceptionally slow. The inside looks no good. A couple of runners go up the fence and fail, so therefore everyone's either scared to push forward and lead or go to that section. Then, you know, people start to struggle to run on wide because the tempos are slow. So you get horses sneaking up the inside. It's not really great for competitive racing. Yeah, you got to, right, Flash. You've got to sometimes, and it desensitises you a bit too. But yeah, I haven't had a good look at this meeting yet, like thoroughly. So I'll probably spend a little bit more time on it. Caulfield's pretty soft anyway, so I won't have to spend much time on it. Yeah, I would say logically, it makes sense that the irrigation readings that we're getting all levels are not correct. That's the only thing that makes sense, because 6 mils of rain doesn't, 2 days before a meeting doesn't cause the track to be slow. Not this time of year. Anyway, we'll get into it. Race 1, midway. Where's that? Betting wise was interesting. There were a couple of well-backed horses that you see sort of started shorter on Betfair than they did SP wise, which is interesting, I thought. A couple that were quite well backed, the last winner, Win Chat, and Drifting, the two most notable. Imark was a decent firmer late after drifting quite noticeably. Betting wise, everything kind of made sense. I thought, as we sort of go through the day, I'll mention it a little bit more. Thought the rail being chopped would have been fave. It's just sort of the way it cambers, the way tracks camber, the more water they put on irrigation wise, it's hard to sort of spread it and keep it. And the way they're designed to drain, more goes back towards the inside naturally. And that's the problem. And they said they had a few heavy dews and things as well, which is sort of moisture that's in the track coming up out of the track. It's not moisture, new moisture, and then it's just not going anywhere. That's the problem. So, first race is a really slowly run race. No merit at all in the race. No merit at all in the last section, given the absolute walking speed to the 600 metre mark. So, very dubious about the whole race, to be honest. Anything that was up on speed was advantaged somewhat. Makes horses and trainers work for the money, though, through distance, too many sprints. What's your contender say? Australian races need to be longer in general. Thanks for this, boss. Thanks for the bulk on Jenny. Just keeps winning on leader buys conditioning. Rose is always leader buys. I don't agree with all of that. When was the last hard rail at Rosehill the meeting before the slip? I'm curious. I'll have a look. Geeing it up. Yeah, rails and runs seem fine, but completely cast. Not too many went there, but I wouldn't disagree that the inside, hard inside, looked inferior, which is usually due to overwatering. All right, so we'll have a look. Yeah, first race, we're looking for negative targets here, if anything. Interestingly, Peak runs the fastest last 8.642 of the day, which is, you know, they're entitled to run home in fast sections here. Field Weary continues to be flying in races that are not run to suit. He's a horse that can hold a better position if it draws well, and it just keeps drawing poorly. So it's a bit of a nightmare. Field Weary. Big Apple runs some really interesting sections here, so an interesting horse to keep an eye on. Super Bright settles a little bit closer than probably expected, which was to its advantage, I would say. Sprints, am I missing anything else? All right, I'll have a look at
Kick was restless there and missed the kick a little
questions.
bit. And Rhythmic Pulse jumped sharp. Rev right up. Cruel Summer goes to second from Super.
So Field Weary not clean away at the start. Peak's another horse that keeps drawing horrifically. I've kept trying to sort of chip away at him. I dropped off him on Saturday, but no surprise that he did run a good race. He certainly has been going better than he's.
Missed the kick a little bit, and Rhythmic Pulse jumps sharp. Rev right up. Cruel Summer goes to second.
Weird ride on Cruel Summer. Just no reason to be kicking up inside the leader here. Could have just easily taken the trail, and yeah, well, you can obviously see if Super Bright's landing third with no real, so force, they're going very slow.
Brimstone caught a little bit deep early in advance of Huon.
Black Duke on the inside, Huon. What's this horse out here? Is that Mad Darcy? I think it is. May Rose back on the inside, nice and keen. This is Big Apple, so interesting to watch it late. So the last three horses run some really strong late sections, but they're kind of entitled to because they are literally going backwards at this stage.
Field is trucking along pretty hard. They're on the inside of Field Weary. Then Big Apple and
I think Molly Burke shouldn't have the coordinates to Randwick or Rosehill Racecourse in her GPS.
Then Black Duke further back to Brimstone, 3 wide on the
She's not ready for it.
Further back to May Rose, Mad Darcy travelling strongly with cover, 3 wide.
The Brimstone 3 wide, sort of working, but they're not going quick. Huon in the middle. May Rose has been, as we said, a little bit keen. It was weird that it was well backed, I thought, unless they'd given it a lot of jump outs. To be resuming off one trial at close to, its peakish distance was a bit weird to be heavily backed. I know the old first up off a bleeding attack gets a huge run as a big positive, but you've still got to be fit, and usually they normally pump the work into them and give them a couple of trials and everything to make sure they're fit. And one short trial was really strange, and it was a slow run trial too.
Summer, Super Bright peeling 3 wide, then Black Duke, May Rose.
So May Rose is the first horse that gets tested back to the fence, but I'm going to say that it wasn't fit. It over-raced, did a lot wrong, and not surprised that it would have failed anyway. Black Duke had a bit of a funny setup as well. This horse is interesting, Big Apple. A little bit held up, does get through the right section. These guys have had to come down the outside. Not too many horses got to this part of the track, really, during the day. So watching this race, I would have thought that it was a strong advantage to come down the outside, considering how slow they've gone. And these horses have all finished off well in those outside sections. Big Apple finishes off well through the middle. Super Bright, as we've sort of seen, was 3 wide for the majority, I think. But going so slow, actually ends up gets a trial, so he just had the best run of all time. You'd nearly have to be quite negative towards Super Bright next time out, just because it's nearly impossible for things to go this well for this horse ever again. And it was such a bad race, so many other horses disadvantaged, that you've pretty much got to be really negative towards Super Bright just because it's won the race. Mad Darcy, nothing special. Field Weary and Peak have run really good races in a bad race. So sort of giving them a passed mark, giving Big Apple a passed mark, treating it as more of a barrier trial for those 3 horses. Rhythmic Pulse was worked a little bit by Cruel Summer early, but they've still gone slow. So I'd say those 2 I'd rather be negative towards them than positive. I think they've both had their Christmas party here and still haven't been able to get their cake, if that makes sense. These 2, whatever. I'm not really worried about them. They're beaten so far. I'm not really sure what to do with May Rose at this stage, and Black Duke's had a long prep and it's coming off a break with, I think, synthetical filler or something. So Huon's had about 43 runs this prep as well, so I'm not real worried about it. I think I want to be negative towards Super Bright for winning the race and having the best run of all time, and fairly kind to Field Weary and Peak. Their poor racing pattern certainly works against them, but they have been drawing wide gates over and over again and sort of forced into that position. So I think both of them could improve with a bit of luck. Yeah, that's exactly right, Super Sonny. But I'll show you, I keep an eye on these horses just because they're going so well. Field Weary's drawn 9, 12, 4 in an 1100 around Canterbury where they went quick. So it was sort of forced back there as well. 10 of 12, 8 of 9, 8 of 9, 10 of 12, 4 of 9 in a fast run 1100 when it was back in distance. So that makes it harder to settle closer. Last start, 12 of 13, 9 of 11. So very difficult to settle close when you're not a fast horse. And Peak, I think, is even worse. 6 of 11 in 1,000 where they ran along. 9 of 10, 7 of 11, 7 of 10, 11 of 11. So a little bit forgiving. When it runs those, you need to be on pace or brilliant. I don't disagree with that. A turn of foot certainly helps. And then every track pretty much is leader dominant. Rosehill is usually like a dry Rosehill is inside in run, saving ground, up near speed is ideal, hard to circle from the back. But most tracks are like that when it's hard and fast. All right, race 2. I thought this race looked better than it was. I thought this race looked like Wymark was a really highly promising horse, Derby sort of potential, and the time's quite worrying. No real merit in any of the sections, but the day is quite light on from that last section. They've done nothing much in the straight, so a little bit wary of that. There's a few races that sort of go out quicker and run decent overall times, but even they haven't troubled the clock really home from the last 600. So some pretty steady last 600s. And even this race here, they've only come home about a length above standard the last 600, and you've still got horses running, top 10 sections of the day. This is not the right race. Probably click on the right race. That'll help. You still have, like Circle of Fire running 5th fastest last 600, 9th fastest last 8, 8th fastest last 4, 4th fastest 200 of the day. So and that's not straight off raw times. That's sort of adjusted for distance and a few things. Yeah, Natoya was, I think I marked it second favourite, Natoya, when it won the Doncaster. He's a very, very good horse. All right, so this is this 2,000 metre race. I was saying I thought it looked a lot better on watching it live, but they have gone quite steady, and there's not a great deal of merit in that last section. So just a little bit wary of it. But as you said, the track was a bit funky. Maybe it was a little bit slower in the straight than the rest of the track. I thought this horse here is called the Circle of Fire was probably the one set the most to do, so the biggest task in the race. Its stablemate Dasho Lenny was probably the one that was most disappointing, I thought. Wymark certainly gets a perfect run and levels out and looks like a natural staying type. Whether he's good enough for a Rosehill Guineas, I'd probably save him for a Tulloch if it was mine. I think I'd try and put him up against the second level tier of top level 3-year-olds, and then might sneak him into the Derby off the back of that rather than tackle the Rosehill Guineas. But that's only my opinion. Nothing much happens in the run. Dr. Evil sits wide throughout and runs last. So the race sort of starts here. Leader certainly had every possible chance in the run. Glad you think so. Wymark gets to the arguable right part of the track. I think Sunlord had its chance, to be honest, even though it's back towards that inside section. A couple of worrying signs here for me is they're sort of bunching up a little bit. Decadent Tales, just a horse, very fit and had the right run, but just a horse. Dasho Lenny's the horse I thought was a little bit disappointing, and this guy here, Circle of Fire down the outsides, I probably thought, arguably the run of the race. You set the biggest task, certainly hit the line as strong as anything. The winner, a nice staying type that maybe not suited to a slow run race, so he's done a good job to sort of get through his gears. He's won off 2 slow tempos now, but I don't think it's really his go, and just looks a natural staying type. And so I think, first and fourth of the 2 horses I'd want to take home out of this race. Whether Dasho Lenny maybe wants to come back in trip or not, I'm not really sure, or a bigger field, stronger tempo back marker, something like that. Did you? I doubt. I did. I marked it second favourite. I marked King Colorado favourite. There you go. Just checked. Second favourite, sorry. Just checked the last 4 years. The rail has been off every time at Rosehill meetings. The slipper, the ones that finished top 4. Just check the last 4 years. The rail has been off at every meeting. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's been rail true every time. The meeting leading up, I think usually they tend to put the rail out and then sort of bring it back to true. So it's a bit weird that this setup. And there's a bit of rain around too, which I haven't checked. But anyway, Slipper's 100 years away at this point. Heading into the next race for me, Circle of Fire and Wymark, happy to take out of this race as horses on the up this prep. The rest, I think, they'll either need to drop back in grade or Dasho Lenny's probably one just to keep an eye on. Went too well first up to be saying it's, not a horse with good upside. Just thought his stablemate was much better. Not impressed. I'm just jury's out a little bit on the time. It's like 5 lengths below average for the class time, even though it is off a slow tempo, is not great. The thing to offset that a little bit is that even off slow tempos, nothing really ran fast last 600s on the day. And this horse is obviously a little bit adaptable and has won off fast at slow tempo. So I'm not knocking him. I just thought it was a lot better win visually before I looked at the times, which make me more wary going forward. So I'm definitely not knocking him. I'm just keeping a close eye on him. And I think Circle of Fire and him I still want to be positive about, which is unusual in such a poorly run, slow time race. It's usually you want to be very wary of this this race. The two things that stop me being super wary are, one, very slow tempo, two, the last 600s for the whole day are pretty weak. So it is what it is.
Magic Night Stakes.
Race 3, Drifting. Pretty well backed horse here, and I think everything went to plan. Outside leader was probably the spot this horse needed to be. Had shown at the 2,000 metre wins that it looked a bit of a one-pace strong type, so it didn't surprise to see it run well over 1,200. It was probably the best back runner in the race. Pretty average ride on Fly, I thought helped, but I'm not saying it should have won the race. Certainly, in hindsight, I just think that it certainly aided the winner and hit a little bit of the merit of Fly. But yeah, good horse. Again, decent overall time off an even tempo. So, it looks a decent enough race. I think it is what it is. I think it's Group 3 form. So Group 3 horses, I think, they're going to struggle to go up in grade, especially this prep. Keen to see what Fly does next time it comes in. Wouldn't be surprised if they put it away now, or they might run in a Percy Sykes or something like that. Sorry, just reading the questions. I wonder if Landy's thinking of fining Bayless for his comment. I don't think it is. I don't think he'll make a public display of Reggie because he didn't cross any lines technically. As soon as if he brought racing into disrepute, you'd have to argue pretty hardly against it. But it's sort of one of those ones where he might get squared up on at some point. Potentially.
And the fillies are off now. Castagna missed the kick. Drifting jumped really well from.
So yeah, this is my issue. Probably number one with Fly. If I'm Jason Collett, I'm just trying to stick on the back of Tim. The only thing in his defence there is that maybe he thought Tim was going to kick through and lead. Either way, you probably just want to, if Tim does kick through and lead, you still probably end up in the 1-1 or at worst 1 out, 2 back. For whatever reason, he sort of grabs hold and lets Reggie reverse park on top of him on, what is the name of this horse? It is called Southern Charm, which pushes him right out the back. So, an even tempo, a horse that looks like it's got a limited sprint, and sort of deeper into first prep, made the job a bit tough. So rather than just stick to the back of Shadow Miraval here, he allows this horse to reverse park, and Drifting ends up outside leader. Not the easiest place in the world to win ever, outside leader. So a strong enough win. I think it's a good horse, Drifting. I think it's a good win. But yeah, I don't know why, considering the tempo is not fast, Jason decided to let his horse come back that extra length, and I think it cost him any winning chance in the race. Clearly. So Castagna back towards the inside off a setback. She smashes on the outside there, and Tatoka's interesting out the back. I haven't had a good look at its run, but I will here for sure because it's a horse of interest, especially if it drops back in grade. So now, yeah, sort of Castagna's popped up into that spot as well, which has magnified the issue for Fly, makes it go wider and have to make a sort of a wider, longer run. So he sort of half loses the turn there as well. The Toka back to the inside. Castagna trying to get to the outside off a setback up in distance. I thought it was always sort of up against it. No surprise to see it not really finish off super strong. Shadow Miraval, every possible chance. And Fly's put in a good burst of speed there. I don't know what sections are like. I'll have a look in a sec. Yeah, I would say the winner's gone really well and continues to improve and has upside for sure. Shadow Miraval, I'd say that's probably as good as she can go, but still not a poor effort. Every chance, but still good. Castagna, I think, was really good off a break. Interesting to see what happens with it. It's a horse that does have upside. Didn't have a great setup going into this race, where it's sort of, if it's this prep or next, I'm not sure. Pretty similar for Fly. Getting deep into its first prep and not sure how much more was left in the tank with her. I thought she hit the line better last start. Didn't quite finish it off there. And that's obviously with a couple of little excuses, but, she probably runs fourth in another 50 metres, whereas the winner holds the first two, I think, no matter how far they go. they need to be well placed, these horses, I think. If they stay in this grade, they can all be competitive. If they go up a cog, they're going to need things to go their way, I would say. So Fly's run the 7th fastest last 400 of the day, yet the 25th fastest last 200, 2nd fastest 400 of the 200 of the day, 6th fastest 6 to the 2. So she's clearly spent all her energy, pretty much at the 200 metre mark, having to sort of sustain that run from a little bit further back, played against her, and maybe that was, not much left in the tank, as you said as well. Maybe she's just out of petrol too. So Tatoka ran, a couple of decent sections from the 8 to the 4 and was gassed. It could improve back in grade, but yeah, it's more about placement for these horses. I can't knock the race. Not since Saturday race 9. Disciplined horse wins at Rosehill. The yellow jack is eye-catching but held on the line. Already over. Let it run. Not sure what horse you're talking about. Chicken Tendies. Sections. The sections were fine. I thought Bayes Angel's a bit of a highway horse. Agree. Curious why you went. All right, next race. So Pago, weird race. Winner jumping from the Blue Diamond where it was sort of midfield or worse. Leads all the way here, 20 to 1. No real money for it. Probably drifted and then firm is probably the best way to describe it late. But goes really well. Sort of sets a controlled tempo, then sprints off it. Never looks like really getting beaten. Nothing really closed with serious fashion. Coleman's gone okay for sure. Not sure what happens between the 8 and the 6 and the 4, because it's run the 5th fastest last 800 of the day, 20th fastest last 6, 3rd fastest last 4, 2nd fastest last 200 of the day. So a run that looked fairly plain. There's some substance to it. Horses out the back were given no winning chance, basically. They're up against it. There's a couple of runners that run decent sections, then drop off late. So going into this race, pretty positive. The race looks okay. Again, it looks like it's, this sort of level. It doesn't look like there's any Group 1 horses in particular here, well, at least this preparation. Obviously, Coleman was favourite for the Blue Diamond, but maybe it's been exposed a little bit. That 1,000-metre form maybe hasn't carried on, but it has run a good race here. So I know it looks the leader, and Dublin Down never looks like really holding the front. I actually was a bit guilty here of thinking that at this stage that Anode would lead quite comfortably, and Johnny the kid would get up outside it quite comfortably as well. And then was watching sort of Gatsby's and horses further back in the field, and then all of a sudden sort of Tim's in front and off and gone. So a little bit of a surprise here, and I don't really see Tim putting pressure on Dublin Down to take up this spot. You can see Anode's actively trying to hold that position, and Tim's not really urging his horse along at all. So yeah, that's a good sign for Dublin Down. I think it's backing up in the slipper. This is, not the same level as the slipper, but it'll run a positive race. I think I can't really knock it. It'll just, probably needs to make 3 or 4 lengths up on the really good horses. Johnny the Kid's had to work in the run. They are, not breaking any records here, but not crawling. Gatsby certainly in a position that's strong enough to run on from. Coleman's on his back, so they've basically had their chance. But as I said, they've run some pretty slick sections for the day. They're just not great on paper. They're not typical fast home times. So very difficult to line up. But heading into the straight, Dublin Down just sustains this run, sustains the sprint, never really looks like getting run down. Anode has been sort of under pressure the whole way and holding ground, so maybe it wants a little bit further. Coleman said I'm not sure, go back and see what happened.
Gatsby's into the clear from John to the turn. King of Rousseau getting close to Hill.
You're not really sure why. Well, he is up Coleman, so it's not as if he wasn't trying to make ground. Gatsby's every conceivable chance. Every conceivable chance. Parkour coming up behind. That's the first upper in Agenda Setter who just gets tired late. Duvana down the outside. Maybe a little bit disappointing, but again, maybe a victim of this day where it was just hard to run home in fast times. So what looks like a average to slow, like slightly below average tempo, maybe was a slower tempo in reality because it was a bigger disadvantage to try and run on because you couldn't run home in fast times for whatever reason. So, yeah, no knock on the winner. Every chance, but decent enough merit. No knock on the second horse. Under pressure the whole way, keeps coming. Coleman's is okay. Gatsby's is okay. Who's run fifth? King of Rousseau, that's probably as good as he can go. Johnny the Kid sat wide and battled on okay. He's got excuses, but sort of interesting for me that he's still beaten home horses like Parkour Duvana that are hard fit or hard enough fit to run on well here and haven't been able to get past him. So again, that's probably a sign to me that these tempos that look a little bit slow are actually in reality playing a lot more like slow, really slow tempos. It's just hard to run on from what I can see. So we get our first strong tempo of the day here with, again, nothing special from the last 600. They've run above average last 800, but last 600's pretty average. Fast time overall. So balancing this out. Positive looking race. AJW been playing video games well before punting, but only signed up for kick just for this channel. Good news. Appreciate it. How do you deal with that when the good time's on the day but not against benchmark? You just got to sort of try and make it make sense. So if all the tempos are, it looks like there's not great merit in them, but all the horses look good. Horses are running decent sections from the back, not making ground. You just got to kind of adjust them. I think. Should have known Ma the Wizard. The biggest ant in the yard. I regretted my bet. Ant is in what? He's a beautiful horse. What Dublin's race against the Gatsby's could easily have been cooked. There was the reason why I was a little bit hesitant about Gatsby's was because he was coming off a gut buster on debut on that track where he chased a fast tempo. He looked like he was ridden upside down to do so. Obviously a little bit wet there too. And then for Waller to not run him in the Todman, I thought that meant that everything wasn't on track, and to hold him back that week was not a great sign that either he needed that extra week to get over it, and then this is their last chance. So he couldn't hold him up again really to try and get him into the slipper. So I'd be forgiving of Gatsby's, and as I said, that wasn't a bad race. That wasn't a bad race.
And a hot favourite to win the Sky High Stakes. Last year's
not much happens here.
And Athabameters going into the Lapore Explode extends the lead to 2.5 to Lindemann down the back. Then came Hopeful, who's presented in much better order. So we'll find scampering along by 2.5. Last of all as they led the way third from 100, a length and a half in front. Coming out just fine.
Lindemann's looked to get everything to suit this race. As it turned out, he absolutely did. Performance is still very good. Just Fine's obviously not come back. Explosive Jacks basically not finished the course, so he's not in the race. Carlapor's run okay, second up. Is it first up or second up? Second up, I think. Stockman's done his usual. Very honest. Athabaskan out sprinted. Just Fine and Hopeful. So it's just a nothing race, but no knock on the winner. Performance-wise, sat off a good tempo. Hasn't weakened at all. Really dominant. Whether you think the margin's going to be overplayed going forward, maybe it will be because, Just Fine's just not in good form. So there's no real opposition here. But on paper, the merit in the win is pretty much the margin. So, I think he's definitely a much better horse gelded. And there's no real knock on this performance other than, what he had to come up against, but he's put 5 on him and he's done it in a good fashion, you know what I mean? So he's run the fastest to the 200 of the day and still held some pretty solid sections. There's nothing much behind to report here. Carlapore, Stockman, Athabaskan, they're all going okay. But whatever. I think that's enough time on that race.
For the Group 3 sprint.
Interesting to see if they back Lindemann up this week. So Group 3 sprint here. This race is another race that I think shows a bit of evidence towards what we're talking about, that it's just hard to run home too quick on this day. So any sort of control up front is a big advantage. It was a bit of a messy map here, and it always looked a very solid chance that that Red Card was going to get full control. And if it did, it was obviously going to be very hard to beat. It ran quite well first up, but had a lot of favours there, and then looked to get more favours. He had trialled well and looked to be going better going into this race. So it's no surprise to see it run well. What does the track come up? So actually, Ratings to Win stuff has the track come up at a 3.7 around the back, and then a 4.3. So the track's not even slow here. It's sort of, well, it is. It's a soft 4 or something, whatever you call it, which is now a good 4, but not in the 6 range. So that's interesting. And I would say the majority of the track, maybe at the back, was even a little bit quicker, which is circle races being faster says that. It says that the straight's probably a little bit slower than the back straight. But they've done some weird things to this straight, for sure. So Red Card straight to the front. Omni-Man not showing the speed that he used to. What else have we got here? Airman box seats. Who's in the 1-1 there? I'll have a look. I'll remember in a second. Is that Dashing Legend holding that spot? Hard to say. I thought Tommy erred in not pressing the leader and really putting some pressure on it. I know he's had to work a little bit to get there, but it's not as if they're running along. And considering he was like 200 metres back in distance, his chance was to grind Red Card into the ground. As soon as he sat back off him and allowed him to control the tempo and sprint off it, that was basically, hard to say, out of play. Yeah, I thought it was a bit of a nothing race. I'm treating it more as a barrier trial for most of these horses. The ones out the back obviously got the tempo against and the pattern. Libertad caught 3 wide, no cover. Omni-Man, every chance. Red Card, Red Airman, every chance, basically. Libertad's the only one that's really had excuses in the run here, wide and pulling. And as I said, the sort of Tommy just putting the handbrake on. Hard to say. Outside the leader didn't really do it any favours. Dashing Legend held up for a run in behind there, but they do all pretty much sprint home like the Flying V here. It's just a bit of a nothing race. As I said, we're sort of treating it as barrier trials for most of these horses. I think Omni-Man's going as good as he can. Decent enough effort from Red Card first up with a big weight, considering it was a slow tempo. You'd have to say Libertad was clearly the run of the race, and if it drew a gate, might have been very dangerous. Where did it draw? I think it drew 9. How did it jump? Bit of a funny horse, Libertad. So it looks like he's come out on it pretty negative. Yet if he had to sort of swap the gates with Airman, he probably could have held that spot quite comfortably. So yeah, run of the race, Libertad, quite clearly by the look of it. Quick tempo, his usual honest race. Hard to say he's run well, but he's just not going to out-sprint these horses. Sort of deep into his prep and back in trip. Yeah, Omni-Man, that's as good as he can go. These guys have all gone okay. Airman okay. I think it's best to treat the races at barrier trial. So I'm not going looking for any horse out of this race desperately wherever they go next start. Maybe Libertad's certainly got a bit of a flashing light on him, but he's a bit of a in and out horse with a stable that are a little bit in and out too. So not a race that looks exceptional on paper, but certainly good enough to feed a similar race. Not going looking for any of these horses in a race like the Galaxy or anything like that, but a lower sprint. Probably Libertad, Airman certainly can improve off this. And the winners clearly flying can go on to something a little bit better. Which version of surprise the money was coming in on Saturday? I'm wondering why it was coming in for. I was starting to think, what am I not seeing compared to everyone else? I've been with it backing the horse since it was 9th May, but multiple starts in Melbourne's perfectly competitive. Yeah, I had a good look at the horse as a closer. The problem was there was no tempo there for her to get into the race. So I agree. I think the earmuffs are a bit one-dimensional. They make you a horse that needs tempo and things to go your way. Whether the horse seems to race better with them, so it's a bit of a catch-22, but it's certainly a horse that not well placed, as sort of Chicken Tendies has been saying a little bit there, not well placed from a track perspective, certainly much more of a Ramwick fast tempo sort of horse. So, yeah, a little bit interesting placement, but didn't do a bad job. Just, everything possible against in this race, and that's why Libertad's clearly the horse that's, done a little bit, because it's back there with those horses, race wide and keen throughout, and still continued to find the line and beat most of them home. So, Libertad is probably the one you want to take out of this race if you're just taking one, and Airman was a good first up run. Far Lap Stakes, absolutely kicking myself here personally, just because Zardozi looked to the only horse you wanted to sort of be with, the strongest horse in the race, clearly. Whether it was going to get tempo or not to suit it was very arguable, and obviously the pattern of the day was looking very on pace. So there was definitely a lot more speed in this race. Our Cougar probably generated a lot of that early pressure. Two stablemates from the Waterhouse camp pretty much carved each other up. And once again, it's not a bad race. It's actually quite a good race, but the winner's very dominant and likely only solid improver, I would say, going forward that can step up in grade. Macarena, very, very honest horse, but just seems to be struggling to put a race away this time in. I'm not sure what she needs. I think maybe 1,400 metres for her in a race where she can lead and control and sort of carve out even sections, maybe much more to Macarena's liking. She can sort of breathe a little bit better and sort of use her solid, even sectional abilities. I think that's much more of her go. So if she found the right race, I think she can definitely win it. Kintyre's just super honest. Levon Pierce is very limited, but super honest. It's run quite well considering it's up there on that fast tempo. Noisy Boy's the horse that maybe puts a big cloud over all of this form. And I'm not a big fan of Tannhauser, He-Man, Saltcoats. I think all of them back there are very similar, averagey sort of horses. I thought Ravello would run better than it did. Keen to have a look at it here. And Rafa Tax just doesn't look like he's come up at all. I'm not sure. Yeah, that's the sort of race that Libertad can certainly run well in. How red coats are not no. Race this. Yeah, that's we'll have a look at it, huh? I'll write it down to have a look at it. The Arrowfield, because I don't know how many horses are going to really target it this year. So it's a good race to sort of chip away at a roughie or two to get them going into the race. Stormboy leads the slipper. I will be extraordinarily surprised. Extraordinarily surprised. I think one of the stablemates may, but not it. All right, Far Lap Stakes.
Waiting for the all clear from behind. There it is.
So I wonder if this is sort of the race that Reggie's blowing up about, and they've just set too fast a tempo. So he's obviously raged up over something, and don't really think that the track was what caused their undoing here. They've just gone too quick on very steady horses. So our Couvert is the one that sort of adds that little bit of extra pressure that probably wasn't expected here. Keeps kicking up inside Levon Pierre, who then has to keep kicking up. Tim on Macarena's sort of forced to work a little bit harder than I'm sure he would have liked. Ends up in a good spot though, as our Cooper's forced to the fence there, and Raff Attack goes forward and basically never travels throughout. So they've really overdone it here this first part. Zardozi back towards the inside there. Bit of a hidden run first up, and my big concern was, the one, the tempo, and two, maybe she was just a run shy. Sort of maybe Vinery was where she'd start to really exert herself as, getting towards her peak. Really exciting to see what this horse does, Zardozi, up against Orchestral. Probably one of the clashes of the spring for mine. There's a couple other interesting fillies around too. So great. I love good 3-year-old fillies, and she's certainly one of those. As soon as she's within a couple of lengths of the lead, the race is over. Ravello off the bit early. Blinkers on today and off the bit. That's not a great sign. The said Noisy Boy, to be ridden closer, ends up out the back and runs on. Obviously, the winner, second horse are here. So Macarena, a decent effort, for sure, because this horse runs fourth. This horse runs last. This horse runs third last. So decent efforts from Levon Pier and Macarena. Said sort of Zardozi cutting under it, staying far enough off the inside. It's been given a really good ride. Salt coats every conceivable. Just a pretty plain horse. Kintyre, honest as always. Noisy Boy's just a weird. What do you do with Noisy Boy? It's actually a good run on visually. You can see it's like a loping sort of style about it, and it might go to a Tulloch and run a race. I don't know. Like, look at him. He's just this climby sort of loping action, and keeps coming down the middle. He's a very interesting horse. Can improve fitness-wise. There was Ravello very late. So Ravello detached itself. This is actually interesting. So Ravello back here, completely under the pump, coming to the turn. And wheels are spinning.
To win the Ajax Stakes, and it kicks, gets 2 lengths clear. Raff Attack dropped off. Macarena pairs all out now.
It looks like it's going to drop out and do nothing, and then very late sort of tacks on. But who's it running past? It's running past a very beaten horse. Yeah, that could be overplayed too. This could be overplayed. Best 2 runs in the race for mine are Macarena and Zardozi. Zardozi, the one with clear, huge upside. If this horse can find a race, it's not going to be easy, that it can just roll along at an even tempo, even if it's this sort of grade. It's not going to run into a Zardozi again, I wouldn't think, if it stays in this grade. She's ready to win. She's just a bit of a nightmare. I think Zardozi's a better horse than Very Elegant. Or just catching up, seeing if I missed anything. But yeah, it's a bit tricky because I'm not really in love with anything. Kintyre's just was well set up fitness-wise. I think that's as good as it can go. I'm not in love with anything that finishes back here. So what is this race? Not really sure, but the winner's super dominant and right on the up. Second horse is sort of set up on that fast tempo as we've talked about and run a good race. So I think 1 and 2 are the horses I would like to take out of this race going forward. Zardozi can go up, and Macarena would love it to stay similar or possibly go back a tier and be dangerous. Maybe back 100 metres too, wouldn't hurt it. Coolmore. So this is an interesting race. No real love in this last section at all. And no speed really throughout. So they haven't done a lot in the run. They haven't done anything alone at home. Time overall is very steady. Very bunch margins. Pretty putrid race, I think. So what do you do with this form? Very wary of it if it's going to something like a Doncaster. I'd be very surprised if that holds up. If it stays in mare's grade, they're not going to run into very, much else, especially I think is the Coolmore Legacy a weight for age race. So that's probably the race that I'd aim up a horse like Zugotcha at. She'll run very well there. Would I aim at Doncaster? Probably not. Corey Brown came out, was critical of the rides of Dylan Gibbons and Zach Lloyd, so I'll have a look at that. Tropical Squall up on speed certainly looked to have every conceivable. Decent runs from Hinge. Renaissance Woman was a little bit unlucky. I remember seeing that in the run. And we'll have a look.
Set now.
Nothing in the sections really stands out either. Melbourne Cup horse Zardozi. That's worry about that in 6 months.
To release the field and does so now. They're off and racing. Tropical Squall.
Madam Pomeroy at the back. Probably the only horse poorly treated at the start was Hell Hath No Fury. Whatever.
And she looks like making the running here from Revolutionary Miss and Jenny.
So Zach's done a good job to try and be positive on Komochi. I think to this point there's not much more I could have expected from him. He's done a good job to try and put the horse into a decent position.
Deep, then Zugotcha settling sixth. In advance of Samana in the orange cap.
So I just noticed here that Renaissance Woman sort of cops the backwash of Deny Knowledge, is it? Deny Knowledge backing onto Samana, backing into Renaissance Woman. She certainly doesn't have the turn of foot that a lot of these mares are probably capable of. She can sort of sustain a run, but goes through her gears rather than sort of sharp sprinter. So the closer she was naturally, the better it was going to be for her. And that extra pair and a half further back probably cost her any chance. It's sort of established, very hard to run on from the back, which adds merit to Zardozi's run, but the race was a strong run race. So Komochi up there facing the breeze 3 wide. Most of these races, it wasn't a huge disadvantage to sit super wide, and they certainly haven't broken any records here, but still merit in the run. You can see sort of pushing forward. I don't really understand what the criticism was from Corey Brown. You can see that he was also critical of Dylan for not sort of towing up on the back of Komochi, but arguably Komochi's off the bit here and has been sitting wide throughout. If Dylan's been sharp enough to pick that up, you know, do you want him sitting on the back of a horse that could potentially take him nowhere and then Hinged whip around him and pocket him? Or would you rather on a horse that's capable of sustaining a run and a bit more of a wind-up horse, getting out and giving it clean air? Yeah, I couldn't be super critical of Dylan here for pulling out that little bit early, considering that Komochi was unlikely to take him into the race percentage-wise. The winner's got the best run you've ever seen and takes that needle-eye gap. You can sort of force... Oh, this is why he was critical of Zach for allowing James to push him out. He's on a horse that's off the bit and been off the bit for a long time, sat 3 wide the whole way. He probably doesn't really have the horse to fight with Zugotcha. Again, he's 3 kilo... Well, he's not a 3 kilo claimer, but he's a claimer. I think he was critical of him not having the stick in the left and sort of being able to shut the gate on J-Mac. He's probably not the easiest jockey in the world to shut the gate on, I wouldn't imagine.
Winding up on the outside. Tropical Squall shows the way from Zugotcha. Wide out is Samana running home hard, and Samana moved up with Zugotcha. They're wide apart. Zugotcha near the inside of Samana.
So yeah, pretty poxy race, I think. Hinge, the strongest horse through the line after its wheel spinning and when it sort of got forced wide there on the turn. Samana forced a little bit wide. Komochi sits 3 wide the whole way and then gets pushed out of the way by Zugotcha. Your issue with being super negative on Zugotcha here is that it is likely to fall into a race next start where it's better at the weight, because I'm nearly certain that the Coolmore Legacy's weight for age, or set weights and penalties at worst, not weight for age, it's a mare's race, but set weights, penalties, Tropical Squall every chance, Renaissance Woman a little bit unlucky, but I don't think it costed the race. There's nothing really doing much from the back that you want to be super excited about. They're all sort of pass marks in a shockingly average-looking Coolmore. You could make cases that Samana, Hinged, Komochi certainly should have won the race. Very bunched, very ugly. Ugh. Don't know what you do with this race. I think nothing's really run super poorly. If anyone was flattered a touch, it's probably Tropical Squall. Not the strongest on the line, but not super weak either. And she's got that great racing pattern, so they're horses that you've got to be wary of not being too negative about. Not a bad run from Foxy Frida doing her thing. They've all kind of run okay. I can't see anything too excited here. Kamoshi, Kamoshi a little bit sick for sure. Anyone watch Bush Horse? J-Mac only wants to win big races now. Best horse should always win at Rosehill. The race is done at speed, so I don't understand that. You're saying the best horse should always win at Rosehill, but you've been arguing that it's the most biased track of all time and horses up on speed tend to always win. But the best horse is not always the one up on speed. Ajax Stakes, I think this is a pretty decent race. They set a solid tempo here. They don't break the clock coming home, but as we've sort of established now, that was not easy to do for the day. Time was pretty good overall. Certainly could see this form lining up in a Doncaster and being a form line that is going to be competitive. So laughable that Territory Express got 20 ratings points for running second here. May help them get into a decent race down the line, but it's absolutely torched that horse's career. I know it's qualified for the provincial final. I don't know whether they'll go that way or they'll try and sneak into a Doncaster. I don't know if that's likely. I think it's a 95 rater now. I think they'll probably just head to that final and then see what happens. But it's going to be extraordinarily difficult to place Territory Express from now on. Obviously very poorly placed here on paper. Not a life-changing result, but a short-term life-changing result personally. And everyone that was sort of in the stream on Saturday was a lot of people on the quaddies and multiples and things like that. One of the viewers took a double with Zugotcha into it as well, which would have been very nice for them to collect a bit of a sick result. Race-wise, as you sort of said, they've gone quite quick here. And if we're boosting the tempos, fast tempos were a little bit faster. Slow tempos were a little bit brought up as well. We're saying it was harder to run fast sections late, so watering down the tempos a touch. They've certainly run along here, and those up on speed probably just overdid a little bit early. I think Rachel was unlucky on a more victorious. I was really worried that she was going to race Fearson, and that was my massive concern. I obviously was a big fan of the horse for anyone listening to me leading into it. But my major concern was that she was going to race Fearson rather than let Fearson go and then sort of sit off him and rock and roll from like the 400, 500 metre mark. The horse misses the start, Fearson. Rachel's eyes light up, which is fair enough. She's entitled to be positive early. And then she's sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Fearson kicks up under her. Her horse gets going keen. She's not someone who can really hold horses too well once they get going keen. So she's in a lot of trouble.
And flopping out the back was Territory Express, a more victorious.
Yeah, I understand that with winning you're in for Territory Express, but the problem is now that he's, you could have snuck through a few ratings races and won a few 100,000 very easily, which he's now not going to be able to do. So Rachel's in an unlucky position here because if Fearson doesn't kick up under, she takes control and probably steadies the tempo and has things her own way. Fearson now kicks up under, they get keen, they go too fast. So Detonator Jack very close, looked very good in the run, probably, in hindsight, ridden a little bit close off a break. He can improve into a Doncaster. I think he's only got 52 and a half heading into the Doncaster. Glory Days is outside Detonator Jack here early. I thought it was a little bit plain. Needs to improve. Here's the winner back here. Here's our horse, Territory Express. As we've sort of established, it was hard to run on. Strong tempo on paper here helped them, but there's still good enough merit in the race and runs from those horses out the back here for sure. Palmetto's trying to slot in there just behind the speed. He certainly has had to work a little bit. Robusto a lot closer to the tempo than I think he needed to be. So the tempo's probably softened up. This definitely softened up Fearson after it's had to work, and then more victorious as well. Robusto, that little bit close. Who's that out wide there? So is that Just Folk rolling forward? I'm assuming it is. Detonator Jack being in front of Just Folk. Probably not ideal. And he is a touch keen if you're really critical. Not critical of, but he's a little bit keen. He's not really. He's sort of right on the borderline. Well wall there, 3 wide on the back of on the back of Palmetto, I think. It's hard to tell. He's a shocker in the middle there. Glory Days a little bit bunchy now. So tempo, they're trying to steady up. First two have just worked themselves into the ground. Saying these two are just that length close. That's the only real excuse for them, but decent enough runs for sure. And it is a bit of a, not a warning sign, but it shows there's a little bit more merit in the runs of these up on speed, that the winners have come from back in a day where it was hard to do so.
Racing to the turn, fierce and more victorious. They've really been dueling in the lead. Robusto's at a great camp behind them. Then Detonator Jack.
So he's done a good job, Zach, to cut ground. Robusto's the horse that sort of costs him probably winning the race for sure. Whereas J-Mac's been forced wide, but he's able to keep that momentum up, and he probably peaked late too. I think this horse has certainly got upside. I was concerned that they were trying to peak him for a Doncaster, and that's why he'd be vulnerable here from that back marker position. I also hope they'd control the tempo up on speed a little bit more than they did, but I certainly got him wrong. And Territory Express, you can see they certainly tried to target that qualifier first up. So he was close to the mark 1400 first up. I think he was closer to peak fitness here than Democracy Manifest. But you can see, like, getting turned sideways here, that's cost him the race for sure. Cost him the race.
Democracy Manifest and Territory Express late. Democracy Manifest, Territory Express, they hit it. Oh, tight.
The one thing that really proves that the tempo was on and it was a big advantage, or not, it was a solid advantage to come from the back's Bold Mac. Running on from the back, he's certainly not, he's not no slouch, but he's just a tough, fit horse that ran past the tired horses late and ran into fourth. So good merit in Detonator Jack. I think he can definitely run well in a Doncaster. Is it Epsom? Whatever it is, Doncaster. It's a Doncaster. I don't even know when it is, autumn. It can run well, drops to 52.5 from, what did it carry here? Carries 58, so it drops 5.5 kilos heading into a Doncaster. Should be absolutely primed off the back of this. Shame that a horse like More Victorious is not going to make it into a Doncaster, I don't think. If it does, I think it can improve. Would love a jockey change. That's very unlikely. You can see Pearson, the one that raced it, even though it did miss the start and have to work harder early, clearly dropping out. So, Palmetto up there as well. The only horse that's really kicked on is Robusto, and he did have a slightly better run and a very, very fit horse. Just Folks run okay. Well Wall a little bit disappointing, you'd have to say. And Glory Days certainly disappointing. So, from a Doncaster perspective, you can't say that Democracy Manifest won't run well. I think he'll kick off this again, but he was aided by the tempo here. Territory Express should have been getting another sort of 6 kilos or whatever it is, or 8 kilos off these horses, which he didn't. So, and looked a bit of a tragedy beat. And this is the horse off setup that can improve, dropping in weight in the Doncaster. I think I'd say they're the only ones that can trouble a Doncaster. This guy's probably not going to get the things to suit. Just Folk is a war horse. Agree with that. Peter Volantis been washing J-Max in his beginnings. Petri Express still a class 3, so on the minimum, 56 kilos in the final. Yeah, so he'll start ridiculously short, won't he, in the final. And Tavi Time being a little bit plain in the last race, even though the tempo was right against him, probably stops him being harder in the market. I don't actually be interested to see. I'll write it down to what the provincial championship market is there, and probably in hindsight should have been backing it Territory Express to win that race prior to this race if I wasn't tied up in this race too heavily already. Agree with that too, especially if Zach's aboard him, and he's done a good job here, as I sort of said, but I think this is when Zach should be used. Lightweight opportunities, not grand finals and not races with weight that senior riders can ride. Anyway, wasn't really his fault that the horse was beaten here. He nearly gave it a 27 out of 10. He just was a little bit stiff to get stuck trying to come through at the death. Last race, I think everyone kind of worked out here, as is as displayed by the Betfair SP being shorter than the fixed price SP, that it was certainly an advantage to be up there towards the speed, and especially if you can control the tempo, then it nearly made it impossible to run on from behind. Derby Time definitely paraded a little bit fresh. I'd say they haven't done a lot with him since the win first up. I think it was a little bit overplayed potentially, just silly short, as in $1.60. Probably should have been closer to black odds. And once everything's gone the way of the winner, Winchat, who was coming off a little bit of not a failure, but a race where everything went against him, and getting deeper into the prep, that was probably the hardest thing to line up. If we got the Winchat of 2 and 3 runs back, he was always going to be very difficult to run down here. He was clear second pick and had a lot in his favour. Everything goes his way. And for whatever reason, Jay rides his horse really well. So I think there was a scratching that was really important to this horse's chances, and the map just looked great. So Derby Time, no real excuses other than the winner has controlled and sprinted home quite solidly. The race overall is just okay, but as we've established, it's very hard to run home much quicker than what this horse has done. So 2.5 lengths above standard is, it's run the 4th fastest last 8, 4 and 6 of the day. So it's going to be very hard. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong race. That's Democracy Manifest. Yeah, he's not run home in anything like that, but sorry. Yeah, Derby Time's to run home quite solid sections. 11 fastest last 8, 6, 8 fastest last 200 of the day. So I wouldn't be sacking him. There's a horse way back here called Sweet Mercy who was dragged out of the race and run the fastest last 800 to the 200 of the day. This horse was given a very similar preparation last time in, where it was given a barrier trial and then showed up in that whatever that weird race was that it won and went like a rocket ship. It won up outside the leader first up when it wasn't really, it's not an outside leader horse, but the race was run to suit it. So I think the horse is airborne, Sweet Mercy, and ready to peak. It's probably my runner to follow from the meeting without seeing the replay again here. So Sweet Mercy, airborne, ready to win. Just don't want it to go out in distance. I think it's a 1,400 metre horse, tops. So keeping that in mind. Head back a bit because I cut it off. So yeah, gets full control, Winchat, no pressure at all from Razors, who was first up. So why would they pressure first up? I think first up 1,400. Walking, Painting, a little bit keen on the inside there, knocks up. Frankie Pino sort of sitting up there out wide, no cover. Outside of Derby Time, who definitely, its wheels spin a little bit for sure. Gently rolled, maybe just got that pair further back than what they probably hoped. I think they would have kind of liked to hold the position like Walking, Painting is in. They weren't able to do so, and that basically put it out of the race. And we'll go back and look at the start for Sweet Mercy, because I'd like just to see if there was intent to drag the horse out. So clearly jumps with them at worst and is dragged out of the race. So it's my horse to follow from the meeting. 1,400 metres next start, Ramwick. Similar grade would be ideal for it. Yeah, the 4 pillars. What the hell was the 4 pillars? But they're very good to us that day, bless its heart. Yeah, I don't know about the surface. As we sort of established, I don't think the surface, it was maybe a little bit choppy, shifty, but it wasn't a slow track. Like, it wasn't a traditional slow track. I think there were some lanes and a few weird things going on, whether it was wind dependent or not. Like, the times are certainly a little bit funky and the straights not fast. And you can see they're kicking up a little bit, so it's not, but it's not a 6. It's just a weird track. And you can see he runs about a bit and does a few things. I think the key is Dylan Off. He's a different horse with Bullock, who's just a stronger rider that can really point and shoot this horse. I think a senior rider going on in the provincial championship final, whether it is Aaron Bullock or someone else, will certainly be beneficial. But all in all, he's run a pretty good race. The leader's just had full control. We've seen that he can carve out good ratings and sections and can, when left alone, do its own thing. So it's no slouch, the winner. It's a pretty good horse. So I'm not knocking this horse at all. There's our little sleeper heading forward for the meeting. Promises Kept down the outside was a really good run as well. 3 wide with cover, I don't think it's really its sort of go back in the field in a sit sprint, so I thought it was really good as well. Promises Kept. And I think this is a bit of a sleeper race, and there you're probably 2 sleepers from the meeting, Promises Kept and Sweet Mercy heading forward. Raises, very solid, hard fit horse in general. Gently Rolled ran well again. Frankie Pino, wide no cover, ran well. Control Tempo. I think this race is not a bad little feeder race for, lower grade races. Even Superium's a underrated old campaigner that never really runs poor races. So, I think, I hope Rachel's not on it again, but if he finds the right race, Sweet Mercy, very difficult to beat. Promises Kept obviously up in distance, and where it can get closer to the speed is going to be far more effective. The winner's flying just needs things to suit. When it can dictate, it's hard to beat in it just about anything, I would say, especially on tracks like this. And I'm not knocking Tarvi Time too much from that. I think it just probably was a little bit shorter than it was entitled to be. Long grass threads to help. Hoof sticky, slippery. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Kibo can't ride. A fade, gets too nervous or something. Is strange. Only beat a length. Wow, thought it got beat. Yeah, it was weird, Tarvi Time. It didn't look like it was going to run a place there at one point. Frankie, interesting run. Molly off. Got a big following. Don't disagree with that. Kibo also told stewards he thought. Superium, a really interesting runner. Wasn't Tarvi Time. I think it was Veta behind the gates. Tarvi Time. Yeah, and I don't disagree with your comment about Ferris B being very vulnerable. You just never know with David Payne, mate, so you just got to keep an eye out. But I know that they gave it a very similar run. If we go back to before it won the 4 Pillars, was it this race? You watch the similarities between there and
Golden Eagle at Rosehill next Saturday.
This was before it won the 4 Pillars. Wide draw, dragged out of the race. Ridiculously slow tempo. I think, did Nash ride it this day? Kara McAvoy. Dragged out of the race. Nothing. Out of the race now. They've gone ridiculous sections and just allowed to work home under its own steam. And then came out and went like a rocket in the 4 Pillars. I'd be... sort of ratings-wise, it improved a lot and ran a peak off that run. So it ran a peak first up, or a peak rating for it, or close enough to it. As I said, sort of a little bit disadvantaged by racing up on speed, but the slow tempo was helpful for it. I think it'll peak and run really, really well next time. Reminds me of Tessark. It's not in a hamburger. Tessark's in a hamburger. All right, we'll have a look at this race at Caulfield that everyone's carrying on about. We did touch on it on Saturday. This horse's record is quite incredible, considering it probably should be dead. It's just, for a horse like Pride of Jenny, go back to its race on Saturday so I can look at the form properly. This horse is just like, because it races in Melbourne, I don't look at it that often. But for it to be able to, these are its last 20-odd runs. Numbers or whatever, it won't mean a lot to anyone, but it's basically gone 20 lengths above on Saturday to the 600-metre mark for the grade. Obviously, it's an open race that's not, an open weight for age race. What is that? So it's an unusual average. You wouldn't have many to line up with it, I wouldn't imagine. Regardless, it's run ridiculously fast sections throughout, maintained the gallop, run crazy fast overall time. It's led 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 of its last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 13 of its last 18 starts. It's led, and the tempos have been crazy. 20 above, 10 above, 13 lengths above, 18 lengths above, 18 lengths above, 7 lengths above. Not only that, it's set up fast overall times, whether it's won or not. Every one of those starts, like for a horse to be in a race where the tempo is like that 20 times in a row is nearly impossible. I don't think I've ever seen it before. And this horse runs extremely well, basically every time, except for 2 runs in Sydney on heavy tracks. One where Reggie was, I think, hauled over the coals for going 40 lengths above on a heavy 8 on a 2,000 metre race. So forgiving completely of those 2 runs in the autumn last year in Sydney, this horse isn't a machine. And it's quite insane what it's capable of doing. That's just number one. So just to say that this horse is inferior to Mr. Brightside is nearly something arguable in itself. So let's have a look at the race anyway. Yeah, that 23 lengths is a little bit tricky because this is probably a higher standard than a 1600 metre open, but that's just going off those sort of times. Almost only beaten by Mr. Brightside. Anything over here? Caulfield, the Rosehill of Melbourne. I agree with that. Remember, yeah. Well, I actually thought that it might get pressure. So at this very instant. So it's a silly comparison because they're very, very, very different horses. But the decision he makes here, if you're going to compare it with, say, Jimmy Star, the Jimmy Star race, there was no speed on paper. There was no sort of designated leader. He's got a line of 8 underneath him. I'm not sure what the line was like in the Jimmy Star race, but I know it was very similar, that he sort of had a decision to make. He was obviously aggressive out of the gates there, mindful of not wanting to get too far back. And that put him in a compromising position where he had to make a decision, either go forward or back, and he chose to roll forward. In this race, you've got not just Pride of Jenny, who's led at those insane, Craig Williams does his homework, right? More than any jockey. I think he's probably the biggest overachieving jockey because he does so much homework. But this race in particular, you had not just her that likely to be up there. You sort of got Buffalo River, Desert Lightning, who are both capable of setting fast tempos. Ayrton, who's, probably a 1,200 metre horse that's going to kick up. Puntura, that's got good speed. Holy Man's that's got good speed. Attractable's a fast horse. So he's got a line of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 horses underneath him that have all got probably arguably better speed than him. So his decision here is, am I going to roll forward and hope to get in front of all of these horses that have got superior speed to me, or do I do what do I make the decision early like he has to sort of try and drop him behind them and beat them to the punch and try and find cover but not get too far back. And I think he made I think he made a great decision. Number one, he's a little bit unlucky. He finds the back of Ayrton, right? So he's a little bit unlucky there. And then Ayrton doesn't hold its spot and allows horses to roll forward. And then he also gets the backwash from, get the right horse. It's not Desert Light, it's Puntura here in the 10. So not only is Ayrton taking a sit, which is sort of backwashed on him, that Puntura takes a sit as well. Pride of Jenny's going to roll to the front, which is not a given. Attractable's a pretty fast horse. But these horses are all working exceptionally hard to take up these spots. So where's he going to go? At this point, he's going to be outside of all of these horses, and he's going to be outside of Pride of Jenny, which is basically, the death position 99 times out of 100, especially for a horse like him. So now he cops Puntura getting checked and Ayrton getting checked, which forces him back even further. With any luck, if those horses hold their spot and these horses don't continue to roll around, Mr. Brightside's in the spot that maybe Puntura's in and no one's making... Well, I don't know how they would have argued that his decision was poor there. So, to me, he's ended up, a pair and a half further back than he should have, given the ride that he gave it. He was just unlucky. So, from this position, she just runs an incredible race, and now you've got these horses that have overworked early, which, everyone wanted Mr. Brightside to work harder than them. They're gone at the 600. And Willow's now forced to make a decision to pop out, which he does. Again, it's not an easy decision to make. He could have tried to stay in and pinch ground, do something like that. He's decided to get out and roll. a forced decision that's given that set the horse a big task for sure. But what else was he going to do? He's had to sort of burn himself up to make this amount of ground. If he drew 1 or 2 and he ended up, stalking Buffalo River naturally or in the position that Attractable did, we might be having a different conversation. But she's not stopping. And Cascadian was well set up to run on from the back, off the tempo, all that sort of stuff. I don't think he did anything wrong. Was never beating a Saturday. It's gone enormous. They're clowns. He's one of the best. Took Jenny 24 seconds to stride to the lead. Didn't look rushed. Should have been an 8-horse field. Yeah, I think that's probably not silly either. Once they couldn't make it a deep, strong field, they might have been better off keeping the numbers down to 8. I haven't heard anyone say that, and I think that's probably true. The fill is what caused the race to be lessened from a spectacle perspective. Like if you had got 8 runners and Pride of Jenny and Mr. Brightside, Cascadian, whatever, it would have been a better contest for sure. So the first across the line through the field. Buffalo strong late. Buffalo's run really well, but Buffalo's a horse that is a high pressure on speed horse. So that he's probably gone as good as he can possibly go there and run 4th. But he's the one horse that sort of appreciates and can deal with that tempo. Whereas Mr. Brightside, would he be able to do that and run to his best? Very arguable. Yeah, I agree. Snooze Fest. I agree with Chicken Tendies. It was it was a really good performance from the winner and not much else. I think it's better than everyone's giving it credit for. Even if you did make a blue here, imagine taking off after it was done. Yeah, it's going to be great. I don't think there's much between them. If he draws 1 and can stalk without doing a lot of work in an Australian Cup, he's going to be very hard to beat. But she's going to be really hard to beat as well. I think at the moment they're like $2.50 and $5 or $5.50s around. I think they should be closer. All right, I'll show you this race today just to get it out of my system. At the mighty Kempsey, no, it wasn't. It was at the mighty Armadale. I just want to show you this just to really exercise the demons once and for all. Ben Look is my absolute nemesis. Number 1. Have a look at this. So it's out here. Look at the gate open. Gate opens here. Horse's backside is outside of the gate. Old mate just decides to shut it, but the horse sort of is forced forward there momentum-wise and then back, which you'll see, so I'll show it in real time. So shuts the gate on it, the horse goes forward, back, they open the gates, misses the start. So to me, is that a fair start? Not really sure. Certainly very average from the starter, I think. The gate's not shut, the horse is backed out of the gate and the guys just decided to shut it. Number 1. Then, fence no good, wet track. Then Looker decides to jam it up the fence, horse goes mental. Then he tries to, I don't know what he's trying to do here, go inside, outside, back 3 bags full side, I'm not really sure. Tries to go up the quicksand and John goes mental. But there's another way to get beat. The gate coming out and back and whatever. That was enjoyable. Yeah, we'll have a look at Keats undid the whole format, getting in the race last year. Yeah, the voting thing, well, it was a bit silly, wasn't it? Like, once you're going to get big syndicates and anyone with a database, like imagine for argument's sake, Ladbrokes, if they wanted to get, they've got their racing club now, they could probably get half the field if they want to. If they wanted to, put it to their database and give them a free bet or something, some sort of incentive to vote for the horse, they probably could get the whole field in. So very laudable the voting side of things. I don't know what that race should be. I don't really care, to be fair. So let's have a look. That's aggressive. The Derby Munro. That doesn't look a very exciting race. Schwartz is an interesting horse first up. That doesn't look exciting. George Ryder, there's all these question marks whether Think About It's going to this race or not. I haven't heard anything. I haven't really found out. I doubt that Lady Laguna will be suited to 1,500 metres. New Energy ran well first up the other day in a weird race. Kovalica. This is a bit of a poxy-looking race. I think Miller tries to go to the Rosehill Guineas. Cosmic Vega, I don't know. It's a bit of a wash to George Ryder. Slipper's interesting. I thought Straight Charge would be a better price than that. If the rain comes, it's the horse that I'm interested in. I think there's 4 chances. Storm Boy, Straight Charge, and the 2 fillies. I don't think Espionage is going to get into the field, which is a bit of a nightmare. And I can't really see anything else troubling them. I don't think Prost is going to get in the field either, which is a bit of a nightmare. It's probably the knockout chance. But I think the values in the fillies, I think especially Lady of Camelot, if it's really wet, if rain comes, I think Straight Charge will go very close to winning. If all things are equal, Storm Boy will probably win the race. Airfield. All right, keep going. Canyon Cups. I'm just going through these. Oh. No. Rambit Stakes. Nothing exciting there. Don't know this horse. Placed to Carousel. Flinderman backs up. You'd expect it to run really well here. Again, nothing much there. This is an interesting race. Tom Kitten favourite? Tom Kitten favourite? Tom Kitten favourite? What? That's weird. That's weird. Anyway, I thought Miller Tries would be favoured here. This is the horse that's interesting. Immediacy coming up from Melbourne. Blinkers certainly looked to switch it on, ran really well. Wymark backing up potentially. I know it's nom for this race. I'd be holding it back for the Tulloch, as we said. If Cafe Millennium runs 2,000, I'll eat it. CO Wolf is going okay. Bit of a poxy race. Cosmic Lad's an interesting horse going forward. Actually, here's the horse that I am interested in. Gambari, $26 each way. That's a big price. That's a big price. There's just not a lot of speed in this race at all, and I think Gambari will get full control and is a tough little bugger to get past. Yeah, I think that's a big price, $26 each way. I better write it down before I forget. I don't think these 3-year-olds are much good, to be honest. And I thought he was tough and not bad through the line there the other day. Galaxy. Have to look at the weights here. I don't think there was really any holes in the market. Osmosis looks to be flying. Cabin was really good first up. No knock on passive but progressive. Surprised that it's 4 is that short. Think it'll get out in the market. I think Front Page will get out. I think Sunshine in Paris, a very interesting horse first up. I'm Mees looks airborne. Cylinder probably must not be running for it to be $21. Hypothetical really fast. Kalos, Remark. Can't see any obvious value there. Osmosis is the horse to beat. Can't see much there. William Reid, that's in Melbourne, isn't it? $1.60, who cares? What was the other race we wanted to look at? Arrowfield. Yeah, this race is very important to understand who's actually going to target the race. I think it's only a Group 3 or Group 2, so it's not a race. It's a bit of an afterthought for a lot of horses. Yeah, Estrella, very good horse, airborne, Cylinder, flying. you probably want to be looking outside in the market at this point. I've been told that Osmosis is not targeting this race, so I'd be careful with Osmosis, even though I think he would go close to winning it if he was targeting the race. I don't know where Skybird's at. There's some interesting horses nommed here. Yeah, Libertad 26 to 1. I'm not going to knock it at all. But a race where you just want to be a little bit careful with. And I don't think it's going to firm, especially in the next week and a half. And the race will probably become a little bit clearer in that time. So I don't think there's a huge upside in launching into anything in this race, unless you're completely confident that that the horse is targeting it. Any other races to look at? Hey John, can you explain Data versus the Eye Caulfield race 3? When it's slow versus standard, how come the back markers were so suited and the front division crumbled? I thought slow out equals hard to make ground. I'll have a look. No total what's finishing. What's max field? 16's max field for the slipper. Hugh's been booked for Tom. Tom Kitten's a lay. There's no other top liners missing. It shows how poor the ranks are at the moment. I think it's Pox, but I don't think it's as bad as everyone's saying. Yeah, well, it is what it is, right? Racing is what it is. Even if it's natural to line things up and whatever. It's more about finding strong form lines against weak form lines. So like a weak 3-year-old bunch in Sydney makes opportunity for that Melbourne horse immediacy, for argument's sake. Snow Patrol Guineas. Where do they all start? Sleep Police. Slipper. I'm on the favourite, very small in the slipper. Not a great result. A small winner, but nothing special. It just never sort of was the right price all along. I didn't think. Straight Charge and Espionage are my better results, and I'm chipping away slowly at Lady of Camelot. I'll probably end up with Straight Charge and Lady of Camelot my best results if Espionage doesn't make the field. Need a massive thing. Assuming centre foot and right. Interesting. Osmosis 17th in order for the Galaxy. That is interesting for sure. Remark pricks my ears. Yeah, I think Remark was only given a barrier trial the other day. I think it can improve for sure. Tough sprinter. What am I looking at here? Caulfield race 3. Very quickly. So Caulfield race 3 is not really a fast tempo. It is on paper, but only because they go out even time, come home below. So it's like a fast tempo but low quality race. So that sort of brings the back markers into it because there's no merit in the section, if that makes sense. So even though it's a slow tempo, back markers can come into it because it's such a poor race. So you just got to be wary of anyone thinking it was a slow tempo and they've overcome a slow tempo. They've only overcome a slow tempo because the horses in front have slowed down, not because they've accelerated at a crazy rate and overcome a really high quality slow tempo. There's a big difference. So pace and tempo, this is a fast pace only because of a poor quality race. Fast tempo only because it's a poor quality race. You can see here they're not going quick. They just don't speed up, they slow down. So the back markers overcome it because they've got a little bit of quality to overcome it. But the race itself is very, very ordinary. It's yeah, the photo was a bit funky, wasn't it? With the colours and what have you, but I thought the outside definitely got in by the slenderest of margins from what I saw. A little bit of a sick beat. If you had been on Wolfie and it got beat, it was probably one of the worst bobs I've ever seen. So I hope that makes sense. Yeah, that's the intricacy of everything. Swords of Switzerland in the Golden Slipper. Mate, I just think he's the horse that's been like insanely flattered throughout. Not in a bad way. I think he's the horse with the least upside from the way I approach things. You've obviously got to take a set on things the way you look at them. There's a few things about Switzerland that are a little bit icky to me, and that's that he certainly had every possible chance. So his first preparation, which to me is a really hard thing to do. So 2 trials into first up. So he's been up since, say, September, October. He's had to trial in January, trial again in January 9 days later, race 16 days later over 1,000, 11, 12. So on paper, the setup's pretty good for a Golden Slipper. Problem is that he's well into his first prep. Waller's not really known for doing it, for mine. He's making little baby steps of improvement, like sort of ratings-wise. But first starting race certainly had an absolutely perfect run there and won. Not great merit in the last section, did a good job, but whatever. Then second starting a race, I think was his best win when he sat outside of Shangri-La Express, who I don't think is a top-line horse, and beat him pretty solidly. And then the other day, I just think it was a myriad of reasons why he was completely flattered, and that was, the bad luck for Espionage, the bad luck for Straight Charge, knuckling at the start, forced to sort of kick up and then was taken on in front. Everything went wrong for him. So I couldn't possibly have Switzerland shorter in the market than Straight Charge, number one. I think he's the weakness in betting at the moment is his price. Yeah, so that's the other thing. Switzerland is 6 months away from developing, and you hear that Waller keeps saying he's strengthening up. That may be the case, but he's always got to be getting closer to that, rubber band snapping sort of situation. He's run the 70th fastest last 200 of the day in winning that race the other day. And to me, that's not a horse I want to be finding heading into a slipper, chasing a horse like Storm Boy. And then having to hold off other horses as well. I'd be in shock if he won, unless he got all favours again. It would be one of the greatest training performances I've ever seen to have this horse win the race. Goes 5 possible leaders. Do you think she'd instruct? Well, it'd be interesting to see who she puts on them, because a lot of them struggle to deal with the situation at times. So hopefully she picks the right horses and then they do as they're told. As I said, I think wet would certainly bring in Straight Charge. I think dry will be very important to Big Storm Boy's chances, because it sort of takes a lot of luck out of the equation. And as Chicken Tendies has talked about quite a bit, Rosehill certainly does favour those horses up towards the speed. So conditions will be very interesting. Barrier draws will be really important. It's a great race. Drifting and Dublin. Drifting won't run, and I don't think Dublin will be going forward with Hugh Bowman on it. I don't think. Yeah, I don't wait till the draw comes out, but I'd be surprised if Storm Boy is the drifter, and I would say that Switzerland's the horse that will drift, in my opinion. Yeah. But I'll come on later in the week. We'll talk about that. Funnily enough, Wolfie's lead up run 2 weeks, 3 weeks. All right, guys. Barrier draw is huge for this race. I agree. Yeah, we can talk about that later in the week. Hopefully covered everything. Interesting meetings. Yeah, as I sort of said, I think there's a couple of interesting horses there to follow later in the day. The rest of the meeting was kind of a lead up, apart from the Coolmore, lead ups to future races down the line. So we'll see a lot of it. Thanks for streaming. No worries. Cheers, make it later. Loves it. Yeah, make sure you follow. I always got to keep saying that just to sort of build those numbers up if you like this sort of stuff, and I'll just keep doing it. Cheers, guys. Have a good night. What are you prepared to lose today? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.